platform. So thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. My name is Lance Wilhelm, president of the Wilhelm Group, and we're here to talk today about the what we call HIFL, Hawaii Island Fiber Link System. If you could maybe flip the first slide. Um, we're going to talk today. We have several speakers joining us, Chris and Cliff and a bunch of other guys. We also had a little bit of time set aside in the back if there's anybody who came and wanted to talk story one-on-one about any specific aspect. The team just came off of doing this kind of meeting, similar meeting in Keaukaha yesterday. We did a similar meeting on Molokai a couple weeks ago, and then we'll be taking the show on the road and talking about the HIFL system. HIFL is a new public-private partnership that will bring faster and more reliable broadband connectivity to Hawaii. It involves laying underwater cable system that will connect the islands, Oahu, Hawaii, Maui, Kauai, Lanai, and Molokai. And then others in our group today are going to talk about that middle mile piece and what that means. But ultimately, the goal of HIFL is to improve access and enhance internet reliability. You're going to hear from a number of our speakers today about how they intend to lay the cable in an environmentally correct way. The project team who has already mapped carefully the ocean floor, and we use technology and staff to ensure that the project's done correctly. So I think my first turn over here is to Chris, who's going to talk just broadly about what HIFL is and how it fits into a broader system.
Thanks, Lance. Hello, everyone. Christine from the University of Hawaii. So the state of Hawaii is running its broadband initiative. We call it Connect Kako. There's a bunch of different programs, including digital equity, last mile access with BEAD, which is a broadband equity access deployment, as well as the middle mile, which is our HIFL system. Flip to the next slide. So real quickly, some of you folks may have heard last mile, middle mile. So the last mile is a connection between your residence and the internet service provider. So think of it like the coax coming in from Spectrum, or the fiber coming in from Hawaiian, or even the wireless access with T-Mobile Home or AT&T or your Verizon hotspot. That would be the last mile. The BEAD program is funding the last mile build out to all of the underserved and unserved residences across the entire state. And actually, BEAD is a nationwide program as part of the Internet for All. So it's funding all of those connections nationwide. In Hawaii, we have about $149 million in BEAD funding to build out to these locations. Right now, the program's going through its challenge process, and there'll be an RFP for the build out at the end of November. The middle mile piece is what HIFL is. The middle mile is the connections between the ISP and going back to where the internet, where we connect to the internet. So in Hawaii, the middle mile connects all of the islands together, and that means subsea fiber in between all of the islands. On Maui, for your internet access, it all goes back to Oahu over the subsea fiber system. Same way with Kauai and the Big Island, Maui and Molokai. Everything goes back to Oahu. And that's why the middle mile access in Hawaii is extremely important. Currently, there are 3 fiber systems in the state of Hawaii. We have Hicks, which was built around 30 years ago. We have Hyphen, which is built a little over 25 years ago. And we have the Paniolo system, which is about 15 years old. All 3 are owned by Hawaiian. And there have been outages on the Hicks and the Hyphen network in the recent years that have knocked off, I think, parts of Maui and the island of Kauai for an entire day. The fiber systems usually have a lifespan of about 25 years. And as you can see, 2 of them are over 25 years, and the last one is almost 3/4 of its way of its lifespan. So the HIFL system is a brand new cable system, and it will have a lifespan of 25 years, and this will carry us, for the foreseeable future until a new one comes up at that point. The importance, again, is that we need the subsea fiber systems to connect our islands together. If we have another break, it would be another couple days outage while those breaks are fixed. So the high full system is funded by state funding, the U.S. Treasury Capital Projects Fund, as well as Ocean Networks private funding. And I think pass it over to Cliff for more information about HIFL.
Thanks, Chris. Let's see. Okay, so as Chris was saying, the HIFO is the middle mile. So you can think of it as like the highway that connects to the smaller streets that then go into your neighborhood. And those would be the NTIA distribution network that's to be built in the near future. 95% of the internet in the world is connected on undersea fiber cables. They span continent to continent, and here in the islands, they connect all our islands. The difference between what we're building and what the large trans-Pacific or transatlantic systems are those are powered. About every 100 kilometer, there's a repeater that regenerates the signal so it can transit those thousands of miles between continents. So they need to have the power to hit all those regeneration devices. But in the islands, because our distances are so short, we don't have to do that. So basically, our system is a non-powered system. And as such, it doesn't emanate anything. Basically, what it is in the deep channel, it looks like this. So these are the fibers. Our system will have 24 pairs or 48 strands of fiber, and needs very little protective wrapping around it. As we get closer inshore, sometimes we have to put a little bit of armor on it because there's wave action. The thing will move on the bottom. And then as we get really close to shore where you have corals, which we have designed to route around, not to damage the coral, so we ensure that we protect the coral. But just in case, we sometimes double armor these. And later we'll pass these around so you can actually, see the cable. So our system will be high speed and very reliable. It'll connect all the islands, and it's what's called a carrier neutral cable system. And what that means is it is open access to all providers who want to subscribe to capacity on the system. A portion of the system will be dedicated to the state of Hawaii. So the state, as part of the P3 partnership, will have a dark fiber pair between all the islands. That fiber pair, when lit with the end devices at each island, can transmit 18 terabytes, up to 18 terabytes per second. Also, the state, as part of the P3, will have 400 gigabits of lit capacity on the system. And that 400 gigabits is equivalent to about what the DOE and the UH currently use today. So they'll have the equivalent bandwidth, and they also have this new dark fiber pair. In addition to that, the Department of Hawaiian Homelands will be granted 200 gigabits of capacity to connect island to island to all the homelands, hopefully for the use and benefit of all the beneficiaries in the homelands. So we talked a little bit about the fiber. So you can see here the type we put in the deep channel, very little protection. Then we do a single armor as we start to come up on shore, and then the double armor. And just for some perspective, you can see the fiber strands there next to a Sharpie, a highlighter, so you can see basically the size comparison of the cable itself. 6 landing sites: Kauai, Oahu, Maui, Lanai, Molokai, and Hawaii Island. Kauai, we're landing at Nukuli'i Beach, which is just past the airport. Oahu will land at Barbers Point Beach Park. On Maui here, we're landing at the breakwater. On Lanai, we land at Manele Small Boat Harbor. Molokai, we're landing through the harbor at the Molokai Yacht Club. And on Hawaii Island, we're landing at Keokaha, Puhi Bay and Keokaha. Now, each of the landings we're building are diverse. They're new landings that don't match any of the previous systems, and that's by design to add resiliency to the state of Hawaii. Our system also differs in a little bit because it encompasses beach manholes, cables that exit the beach manhole, go on shore, and they will go to cable landing stations. Most systems that when they're built, previous systems, they're just beach manhole to beach manhole, and any of the users have to figure out how to get from the beach to a data center. But on our system, we're building it straight into the data centers. The cable stations that are being built have like a mini data center component in them. Most of the cable stations are established on University of Hawaii facilities, and we'll talk about that just in a bit. Okay, here it is. So on Kauai, from Nukuli'i Beach, we'll have a land segment which goes to Kauai Community College. On Oahu, Barbers Point Beach Park will connect to the University of Hawaii West Oahu campus. From there, we then extend to just outside Honolulu International Airport to a facility called DR Fortress. The reason for that is DR Fortress is the state's internet peering point. So all the existing cables that leave the state in and out of the state of Hawaii that go to Asia, Oregon, California, Tahiti, American Samoa, Australia, New Zealand, all come into and cross-connect to each other at DR Fortress. So by building this system there, we can then cross-connect to all that capacity and bring it statewide to every island. On Molokai, we'll go to the Maui College, the Education Center. Manele Harbor, we're stopping at the harbor, a small boat harbor, and on here we'll come to Maui College just across the road. On Hilo, we are landing Keokaha, but we transit on land to the University of Hilo. The reason for that is if you don't build it in this fashion, you normally have to deal with private landowners, which is quite difficult to get permission to land and to get the easements you need. By working with the state of Hawaii, that totally eases the process. And also, by going to the university properties, all the land-based companies that would extend from the cable landing stations are already present there. That would be Spectrum, Hawaiian Tel, all the wireless providers, AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile. They all have a presence at the campuses already, so they can easily cross-connect to the system and cross-connect to the bandwidth that comes off the system. And that goes back to that equal access part. They all have equal access to the system. Okay, and now we'll get into some technical details, and I'm going to pass the mic to Steve Brock. Steve Brock is our in-state construction manager.
Hi everybody, I'm Steve Brock. I'm the Hawaii Construction Manager for Ocean Networks. I'm the project manager for all the landings here, and here to explain to you a little bit about this. So as you can see from our system design here, we call it a 48 fiber backbone, and it's capable of transmitting quite a bit of information, about 138,000 two-hour movies every second. Go ahead. Some of this has already been discussed. Oh, here we go. Here in Kahului Harbor, and you can see it on the panel board here, this is our plan. We're right over here, as you know. And up here on the western breakwater, our intention there is to put in a beach manhole. Purpose of the beach manhole is to anchor the submarine cable. So obviously the cable doesn't pull back out. The dotted lines here represent the direction of what we're hoping to do horizontal drilling. So we'll enter on the green dot and exit the sea floor, basically where those white dots are. Place the submarine cable in there. The way we do that is we'll have a vessel come in, and at first crack of dawn, they'll feed it to some equipment and pull the cable ashore. And as soon as that thing is anchored, the ship steams away. Double landing might take later in the day, but typically that ship is gone by 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning. Once the cable is anchored, we'll be placing it in conduit, similar to you see everywhere else on Hawaii. And we're going to be putting a prefabricated cable landing station here on the campus. And what that is we've designed a 40 by 40 square foot building, or 40 by 40 square building, and that's where our submarine line terminating equipment will be going. It'll all be underground. You won't be able to see any of it when it's done. We typically cover our beach manhole and everything else. It's out of sight, out of mind kind of a thing. So hopefully there won't be any residues there. This is typical. We've got this typical drawing here, but as you can see the components just explained. The difference is here in Maui, we will not be going on the aerial poles. On some of the other islands, we're trying to take advantage of the existing facilities so that we just make the least perturbation as possible. However, on this island, it'll be underground all the way back to the campus. This is our Maui construction duration. As you can see, the underground bore pipe is going to be taking quite a bit longer given the length of those bores. Beach manhole takes about a day to drop it in. So the way that works is we dig a pothole so that our bore can enter at an angle. So we'll dig down 8 or 10 feet and then have the thing enter at an angle. When the pipes are in place, we come in and drop the manhole on the pipes in the same hole. So then we'll just anchor the manhole in there and fill it in. And our cable station building, it takes about 4 to 6 days to drop it on the pedestal once it's there. Obviously, that's not our make-ready time of getting the foundation in, but those are the components, basically what you see on the slide. I wish it was easy as 1, 2, 3, 4, but it looks good up there. This is our project schedule, and I'd like to point out in particularly that this is the design and engineering phase and surveys and assessment. That's where we are now. We have desires, but we haven't filed exactly what we're going to do because we're still confirming that it has least impact. And we've changed our plans a few times, and this is quite normal for submarine cables. It's one thing to open the phone book and say, let's do this, and then when you get out there, you find microbes and plants and all kinds of things, coral, where you never thought it would appear, which was a very pleasant thing, but it causes us to move around. And so we finished our desktop studies, and now we're in the engineering, which is basically refining our design for the desktop studies. We're hoping that in the first part of 2025, if we continue to have good luck, we'll be able to move forward with our environmental assessment. The goal of an assessment is to have a finding of no significant impact, which is why we do all this work, and when we find a significant impact, we change direction and we adapt. So provided that we get that permitting lined up on schedule, we expect to be finished with the project no later than the end of 2026. Okay, I think that's about it. My slides. Does anybody have any questions about that part? Happy to take them. Yes, sir.
I had 2 questions. One, the connection at the manhole, there's not really a connection, it's just a pass-through. At that point, there's no, you don't have a different cable you connect to at that point. You just pass it on to the building? Or?
No, sir. So actually, what happens is, and I don't know if you can see this, if you see the armor that's wrapped in there, the point, as Cliff Miyake was explaining, the nearshore cable has 2 of those. And so what we do is we shave it back and we fan them all out like a big sunburst. And then we mount very securely a plate to the inside of the beach manhole. And the beach manhole, the side that faces the ocean, is quite thick, sometimes 24 inches, depending on how many cables you're putting in it. And then there's a giant plate on this side, and we take that flange and we pinch it between another plate and bolt it down. So that cable actually stops the rest of the cable from sliding out. Then the internal part that you see, which is the fiber optics, we put that in a splice case and we bring in a land cable, just exactly like you see everywhere else. It's just Kevlar jacketed land cable, and we splice it in the beach manhole.
The other question I had there was the beach location here on Maui or the other locations. Is there consideration for expected sea level rise in the next 30 years?
There is, and we calculate that in. But in some cases, like for instance, a good call on that, because like in Lanai we're safe over here. You know, it depends on which one you're looking at. But there's other manholes which we have, which are right now about 3 feet above sea level. So we engineer those to be underwater. Okay. Okay, thank you. I'll hand you back to Cliff now.
Okay, so once we build the system and activate it in late 2026, we believe the benefits to the state are it will enable the middle mile connectivity, which when combined with some of the BEAD and NTIA connectivity to be built, will be able to connect to all the anchor institutions, your schools, library, health clinics, health centers, hospitals, public safety entities, and education facilities especially. And also, this system will be the middle mile or that central connecting vehicle to enable the BEAD and the end last mile connections to happen in the state of Hawaii. So at the end of when all of that comes together, we hope that everyone who's unserved or underserved will no longer be in that situation. And that we can then have a lot of people have access to digital literacy and equal access, all the things we all strive for right now. I'll hand it off back to Lance.
Okay. I noticed a few people came in a little bit later, so I apologize. We kind of started a little after 5. But the main thing is we do have representatives here that will be here for questions and answers now and or afterwards if you just want to have like a talk story with one of the people. So this is, again, this project, HIFL, is a public-private partnership. It's a true partnership between the public sector and the private sector. Here we have our partner on the public side. The University of Hawaii has been a very, very great partner for us in helping us work through the component parts. We land most of the cable eventually on University of Hawaii property, and they've been a great help to us. And Chris has joined us in these public meetings. He didn't mention, but he is Sig Zane's family. And if you want Sig Zane clothes, you got to go ask him. And he keeps saying there's no family discount, but I'm not sure I believe that. I think that's just for me. Also wanted to make sure we give our aloha to Representative Yamashita. Thank you for coming. Really appreciate you coming out. And then on the private side, we have Ocean. Oh, I'm sorry, council member. Aloha. Hi, how are you? Good to see you. Thanks for coming. And on the private side, we have Ocean Networks, and they're bringing their technology and their experience and all of their expertise to bring to bear on this middle mile segment. So that partnership is really necessary to make this project happen. So why are we here? Why are we talking story now? Because we're getting into that portion of the project where you might start seeing some guys with yellow construction vests and clipboards and guys doing surveys and stuff that looks like construction and engineering in the field, and we wanted to make sure we get an opportunity to get in front of that, talk to the public about their project. So if you see some of that activity happening, you know what that's about. We have a fairly lengthy process to go in terms of our permitting, all of the requirements for permitting, the environmental studies and all the things we have to do to make sure all of that is correct and pono. And then the actual construction period is quite short after you do all the years of planning and programming and designing and engineering, and then we get out in the field and we get to do kind of what we do for a living, which is like build stuff really fast, and then we get out of the way and everybody gets better internet if it all works out well. So we do have expertise here on the technical side, on the delivery side, on the construction side. So if there are questions, we're happy to take them. And my job is just sort of like to deflect them around. If anybody has questions now. Yeah.
The,
Oh, oh yeah, because we're on public access TV. And so, yeah, so you could face that camera if you like.
Howdy.
Yeah.
The question was the connections to the anchor institutions and so forth.
Yes.
That is actually through the local carriers. It's not
On
any,
the last mile. So I'm going to give that one to Cliff or.
Yep. Yes, those would be through the local carriers, Spectrum or Hawaiian Tel. And also, there may be some new connections created by the BEAD as BEAD rolls out, depending on which location and which institution.
Or in the case of the Department of Education, the DOE would have access to the state's bandwidth, and the DOE is running on the state's network. So the schools would gain access for higher capacity between the islands. Same way with the state services, even the county services between Maui, Molokai, and Lanai, and the university, of course.
that DOE bandwidth is just allocated bandwidth on the local carriers, or do they have their own cables?
The well, the DOE has access. I'm just speaking from what I know because I'm with the university, not the DOE. So, a little caveat there. The DOE has access on the statewide network right now. So I think they use that for services between the schools back to the data center on Oahu.
Yes.
You. I'm just curious how this will help improve internet access in rural districts in Hawaii and what areas throughout the islands are in most need of access to internet and broadband services.
Sure. I'm going to get Chris handle that. I think want to just make a quick reminder. So the system really is like three legs, right? So the first one is that big fiber cables that run across from continent to continent that run on the ocean floor. That's sort of like the first leg. Our leg is sort of that middle leg that connects to that between the islands and then comes up on land and connects to a data center. Then that last piece is how to get from that data center out to the people, and that's kind of what you're asking about. So I'm going to let Chris talk about that.
Right. So again, remember that there's the last mile piece and then the middle mile piece. The last mile piece in your questions, I think the underserved, the unserved locations, that would be funded by the BEAD program. So that would provide connectivity for the residents to the ISP. And that's one piece of the puzzle. The second piece of the puzzle is the middle mile, which connects Maui back to Oahu or the other islands back to Oahu to then get access to the internet. So everything's kind of layered upon each other. So it's a holistic solution.
And BEAD is what kind of
BEAD is the Internet for All from the federal NTIA. It's the broadband equity access deployment. So it covers the build out of infrastructure to underserved and unserved locations as well as the digital equity piece.
How is that?
So the BEAD program, there's a whole, I don't know, process behind it. Right now we're in the challenge process. I think there was a period of time where we had to look for all of the underserved and unserved locations. There was, you put it on the map, and then it was run through a challenge process, and now there's rebuttals that the providers go back and say, yes, we can serve this, no, we can't serve this. Once we get to the end of that point where we find out the locations that cannot be served with the current carriers network, we will put an RFP out to say, hey, carriers, please build this. How much is that going to cost? And we'll have to award those carriers at that point, whoever wins the bid.
I think there's some inherent expectation that some of the more underserved areas are DHHL homestead areas, which is partly why DHHL has their own kind of allocation within the system, which is dedicated to them, because that recognizes having some of the most challenged areas. Yeah.
That's part of this effort. It's part of this.
Yeah, so it's part of the public-private partnership. allocation. So think of it as like a pie, and everybody's got to get a piece. So that pie is sort of how it was already broken up in pieces, and some part of it, and dedicated for certain reasons. So part of that pie goes to UH and the state itself, and then a little piece goes to DHHL dedicated to it, so that they can have dedicated service, and then the rest of it is sort of available for public consumption in various ways.
And to add to that, on the DHHL piece, we are granting DHHL 200 gigabits statewide to connect to all the homelands. And we are in conversation with the DHHL technical staff, and they also have hired some consultants to do a white paper on how best to take all the funds that are coming in, the once-in-a-generation funding that the federal government is providing, combining it with the grants they're getting, and to create a comprehensive solution that will maximize the benefit to the beneficiaries on all the homelands.
And oh, sorry, one
Yeah,
more question.
mhm.
I just know that like after COVID, virtual schooling became the norm, and I've worked with schools where they are doing school virtually, but then we have issues with internet. Will that be somehow tied in with this? I know is there a Department of Education representative here, or?
I don't think we have a DOE representative here, but this part of this project really gained traction in part because everybody sort of recognized the importance of internet. It's always been important, but I think COVID really drove that home when everybody had to go home to do everything. And now when you look at like the age of the system broadly and the risks associated with damage to a cable, not just kids at home can't get on school, like whole communities shut down because everything runs on the internet now. Like you can't buy gas because all the gas stations are plugged into the internet. And if we don't have the redundancy in our systems, really bad consequences happen. And so this is about not just creating better, newer infrastructure at higher speeds, but also redundancy to make sure that we can service all, right? So DOE has been part of the discussion here because of the need for internet just broadly. And then the schools themselves are using much more internet than they ever did before too. So in universities is a lot that, frankly, we all do, right? Because I need to stream Netflix at my house. So, and if I don't get Netflix, it's really bad in my house. So it's really important that we get that. Yeah.
You said you took into account the rise of the sea level, but also we're on a specific area of the Earth where we have active tectonic plate and we're near a hotspot. How does that factor into everything that's happening?
Engineering related to sea level rise or also earthquake potential.
Well, sea floor movement, but also we're on an active hotspot, we're in the Hawaiian Islands next to volcanic activity. How does that factor in with what they're designing?
Okay, so how it factors in is we looked at the seafloor where the hot spots are because there's faults down there, and on the case of the most active and dangerous one, which is just off of Kohala and just off of Puna, we're actually north of the one on Puna, and that segment of our cable actually goes all the way around the north side of the Big Island and the north side of Maui to come into Kaului. Well, the reason is what you said. These faults are out there, and so we needed to find the good earth over 100 miles, and so it's not easy for us to zigzag like this. So we had to look for what was a continuous or the most continuous, least impactful route that was also away from those faults. Because you're right, those will cook your cable, and so we have to avoid that stuff. Yeah. Now, on the other hand, University of Hawaii, they have submarine cables that they use to study those faults. So there are submarine cables that can take it, but communication cables, you can see this is what's in the deep water, and the magma is going to make short work of that. So that's why we
with that factor, are they part of, I guess, with the UH studying does that assist with you planning on watching it for movement when it starts shifting?
Oh, you're talking, yeah, in the
Like,
plates.
I mean, because he's talking about 30 years.
Right.
Glacial melt, that will accelerate, and
S-
it's looking like it's accelerating extremely right now.
So the way we watch for that is on the submarine cable systems, we have lit circuits that we set aside for monitoring, and we have special equipment that watches for things to happen on there. And the submarine cables have only been around since the late 70s, early 80s, and the technology to monitor them has only been around since the early 2000s. And so the answer to your question is yes, but it's still very much being developed. And the way that we do it is we monitor certain vibrations and we monitor for fades of service that would indicate that our jacket's been corrupted. We do those kind of things. But probably the most important thing we do is just avoid it. You know, go out of the way to avoid any of those hazards if we know about them. But it does happen that we'll put it in a bad place or something happens and it gets cut and we got to go out and fix it. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Yes.
I was just wondering, so it starts on Oahu, is that right? The
Kauai,
connect-
really.
Oh, Kauai,
Yeah, yeah.
okay. And then trails all across the island.
Touches
so,
all the islands, yeah.
I don't know enough technically, but
Mhm.
does that mean the further away you are from Kauai, it has an impact on the capability,
Or the quality of service.
the
That's
quality
excellent
of
question.
service?
Excellent question.
Actually, as it gets to every cable station, we have equipment in it that has lasers, which generates the light that goes on the fiber. So island to island, it's a separate segment or a digital line segment. So each one is as strong as the other. Because on every island, basically, you're sending a new signal. Yeah. And going back to your question a little bit, okay. Yeah, and then there's a 200-kilometer limitation on the light, was what Steve just said. But we've accounted for that in the engineering, and we're also accounting for that in the type of equipment and the strength of the lasers we use to account for the distances island to island. And in past systems we worked with, we actually had where the lasers were too strong, so we had to do what's called tuning and make them put filters so that it adjusts to that exact span from that island to this island. So in all the engineering planning we do, we take all those factors into account. And back to your question a little bit, we have had conversations of using something on a pair of the fibers, which is called fiber sensing. And what it does is it uses the physics of light, because as you send the light actually kind of bounces in there. So you can measure the distance and the timing of the bounce. And when the cable moves, it'll change that timing. And the equipment on the ends are so sensitive, we can capture that and have like AI, almost it's sort of like AI, but it's not. It'll sense what's going on and send us a message saying something's happening. Yeah.
Oh, cool. So that's why I was asking if that's tied into UH study of it, studying the movement as well.
Not actively just now, but we have the capability to add it. In fact, we have talked to a professor at UH who we're having discussions about potentially doing it because it would add to the research
Great.
capabilities. Yeah.
And then also in terms of staffing at each center is what you call it on each island, is there someone actually staffing each of those centers, or is it all done remotely?
The data centers, those are unmanned stations, so they don't require people to work in there every day. Now, obviously, if something goes wrong, they'll send people and they'll fix it, but it doesn't require people to run that.
So if something goes wrong, there's someone on island that will be on call.
Yeah. So the plan is to have staffing available on island to address any issues at any part of the system that this middle mile deals with, whether it's the beach manhole connection, the splice, the data center. The plan is to have on-island capabilities. Yeah,
So in a worst case scenario, if for some reason the data center goes down, then we are just where we were before you put in terms of
Yeah, so
Do you
keep
know-
in mind,
yeah.
this is not the only way that the signal
Right.
gets around. Yeah?
Right.
So this is a way. It will be the newest way. It'll probably be the fastest way.
so whatever we
But-
have right now,
Mhm.
it would kick.
It
to-
doesn't go in. It doesn't go away. Right?
It doesn't
so,
go
yeah.
away. So at the least we have that.
Yeah.
If your center goes down.
Yeah, and
Okay.
so it's adding capability, not subtracting capability.
And to that, we just, in fact, yesterday, we had a discussion with another group where we will probably back up each other's systems. So we're going to have fiber on theirs, they'll have fiber on ours, and both of us will take the configuration of the bandwidth and create what's called rings through the state. So if one path were to fail, you have the failover to the other path. So yeah, we should add a lot more resiliency. And because we're both at a minimum doing it, both of our systems will be that much more resilient, which should benefit the state.
We really do, by the way, appreciate the questions, and we're capturing a lot of them, not just
This around.
yeah.
I'm gonna pass these
Okay.
around if you guys
Not
wanna
just
share.
via the television, but also for the purposes of making sure that when we come out with our permit sets and our environmental statements, whatever, all of the questions that we receive, we can address appropriately. So it's important that you ask them, and we really appreciate that. We're gonna go ahead and, because there's food sitting over there looking at me, we're gonna go ahead and let you add it. All of the guys that are here that spoke, and some of the guys that didn't speak that are standing here trying to pretend they're not part of the team, they're available to you to ask whatever questions you want. And just know that they're not just here to answer your questions, but to capture them so that other people who have similar questions can get the answers that they want as well. So guarantee your question, somebody else has a similar question. Yeah.
Thank you. So thank you for being here.
Yeah.
I did hear a presentation from Hawaiian Tel, I think, and they were working on getting a pathway down to Hana, I think was it, right? Trying to get us so that we would not be so remote, and we saw what happened, right, during COVID. So this now finishes all the work that was being done on Maui, and then we are now in the next phase of growing the system and connecting us. Is that what's happening? Sorry, I was
Yeah. So that's sort of dealing with that last mile to get it to the service user, right? So the end user,
Right.
and then this piece is going to help connect that network to the broader network.
And so I just have a little question. Maybe it was talked about earlier, but in terms of the county, what are the expenses that, or what's happening budget-wise that we need to be sensitive to? I would guess that there's permitting, unless that's done already, but would love to be of assistance.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, because we will need all the normal permitting that any other construction project will need. And so we're doing an environmental assessment, as was described, and then simultaneously already working on design so that packages can be put out for bid to contractors as well as put in for permits, right? So we'll have sections of that will require permitting, and we have time in our schedule to procure those services. Yeah.
So all the funding basically is coming from the federal government.
Yeah,
State.
yeah, it's a public-private partnership in that regard as well, right? So there's private finance as well as public finance.
Is Ocean Network charging anyone for the service? I know you're getting paid, but there must be some
Yeah, the way that the
benefit
finance
to
work- yeah,
Ocean
we'll-
Networks.
Yeah, we'll let Cliff answer.
So it's an open access system. All the carriers can subscribe to service. We currently have at least one who has signed up to get a fiber pair. We've had discussions with 2 other major entities in the state, and basically we're just in negotiations at this point to get to the final figures. So yes, they are paying for their fiber pairs. We also plan on lighting some of the fiber, like 2 of the strands, and doing finished bandwidth, which we will wholesale capacity to aggregators who would like access to it. And they would then subscribe and pay for that bandwidth they're using. And all of that funding will then fund the continued operations and maintenance of the system, as well as the private-public partnership. There's equity shares. So this is probably the first system where the state of Hawaii will actually own part of the system. They have equity ownership. The projections, financial projections, show that about somewhere between 3 and 5 years into operation, there should be some profit coming in. So the state will actually potentially have profits as part of their equity share, which over time may even replace the funding that came in at the beginning. It may take a bunch of years, but the projection is it should happen based on successful usage of the system to its capacity.
And what's the difference between these two?
So the fat one
Yeah.
is the part that comes up on land, basically, because it's rougher in that area. The skinny one is the one that basically lays on the ocean floor in the deeper ocean.
And this is the actual size?
That's it. Yeah.
Wow.
The fibers in the center.
Hmm? Yeah.
Fibers,
Yeah.
which is fit away.
Also, one thing to note about that is they're not really different. The skinny white one we call LWP, that's actually medical grade plastic. And if you look at the big one, it's the skinny one with the banding wrapped around it. And what they do when they double armor it is they put another layer of banding around it. So it's not actually, I mean, it is 2 different cables, but set up that way. And just wanted to add that. And also, another thing that we're doing, and we've had mentioned before, that's something that you guys should consider, is this advance notice of the submarine cable gives you an opportunity to do workforce development and business development around this cable before it comes. Just one point.
Okay. Okay, so apparently we have the room till like 7 o'clock, which gives you an hour and 7 minutes to eat the food that was brought here. So thank you so much for coming. Really appreciate it. Mahalo. And then please do spend time with the guys and gals that kind of know the stuff, because they'll answer your questions good. Okay? Thank you. Mahalo. Aloha. Thank you for being here.